You should be following along in your book. This is 5-1 checking accounts. There are 3 objectives. 1, you should be able to record a deposit on a check stub. 2, you should be able to endorse checks using blank, special, and restrictive endorsements. And then 3, you should be able to prepare a check stub and a check. Okay, so how businesses use cash. When we talk about businesses and actual cash, they're only going to have small amounts of cash on hand. They're not going to have a lot of cash. When they are going to use big payments, that's when they're going to use checks. When we talk about the use of cash, sometimes there can be errors made when we have cash because we really don't have any evidence of what that cash was used for and how much was actually used. Because really, when we think of it, it's pretty easy to transfer the ownership from one person to another. And there's really no question or, like I said, evidence of that cash being used. The other thing is sometimes that cash can be lost pretty easily when we're moving it from one place to another. Okay? So for safety reasons, a lot of times businesses just don't use cash as much as maybe we do as consumers. So what they're going to use more often is a checking account. Checks are a business form used for paying cash from a bank account. So what happens is a business will write a check, and that check then tells a bank that they need to transfer the money from the person writing the check to the person that received the check. And that comes from a checking account, which is really the bank account which those payments just come from. Okay, so if we are going to open a checking account, there are 2 things that we would have. There's something called a signature card, and then also another thing called a deposit slip. So when we talk about a deposit slip, that's just a form which lists the checks, currency, and coins an account holder is adding to the bank account. So when we go in and we deposit cash, we are going to fill out a sheet that says, okay, we have this many coins, or we have this many dollar bills, or this much checks. It's just a receipt. It's evidence of what is being deposited into the account. This is an example then of a deposit slip. Those of you that have gone to the bank that have checking accounts or savings account may have seen something that looks similar to this. So we can see over here, here is our date. We can also see that we have one check. Notice that there's the check number written here. The check was written for $2,000, and so our total that we are depositing is that $2,000. Now, when we deposit something, we are going to record that on a check stub. This is an example of a check stub. Depending on where you work or depending on if it's personal, your check stubs may look different. I'm assuming that most of you that you have used checks or seen checks, you probably have not seen a check stub that looks like this. A check stub is just really just keeping record of what you have in your account. So when we look at this area right here, we see balance brought forward. So this was an account that we're just opening. So there's a 0 balance in there. And on January 2nd, here's our date, we're depositing that $2,000. So that is this receipt here. We're showing that on our check stub. We're depositing $2,000. So now we have a total of $2,000. So first thing that we're going to do to fill out that deposit is we're going to write in the balance. Then we're going to write in the date. Then we're going to put the amount of the deposit. And then we're going to put the subtotal after the deposit. So if we had an amount written here, so let's say that we already had $1,000 in the account, we would take 1,000 plus the amount deposited, 2,000, to give us the subtotal of 3,000. Okay, endorsements. Endorsements means when you sign the back of the check. Now, sometimes it's going to be a stamp on the back of the check. And really, that's just saying that you are okaying that transfer of ownership. Now, there are 3 main types of endorsements. We have a blank endorsement, which you are probably most familiar with. We have a special endorsement, and then we also have a restrictive endorsement. Now, a blank endorsement is literally just the endorsement with the endorser's signature. So Michael Delgado is the one that's signing this check. He is saying that it is okay to transfer that money. The special endorsement is indicating a new owner of a check. Special endorsements are also sometimes known as endorsements in full. So notice where we see here, it says paid to the order of Helen Goldsmith. And then we have Michael Delgado's signature. So what we're seeing here is that Michael Delgado received this check, and instead of cashing it for himself, he is going to pass that over to Helen Goldsmith. So he is saying pay to the order of. Okay, so he's really using that check multiple times. Now, I would say we probably don't see this one as often. The blank endorsement is the one that we see majority of the time. With businesses, however, businesses mostly are going to use this restrictive endorsement, and restrictive endorsement just means that there can be no further transfer of that check's ownership. So notice when we look here, it says for deposit only to the account of Delgado Web Services, and then the check is signed. So what happens here is that, let's say that we have this on the back, we have signed it, and we accidentally lose the check on our way to the bank. No one can pick that check up and deposit it into a different account. The reason for it is because it says specifically on here that this check can only be deposited into this Delgado Web Services account. A lot of times as well, it's not on this one, but a lot of times they'll have the actual account number written on there. Now, this is an example of a completed check stub and a check. So we are going to actually fill out the check stub first before we fill out the check. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that we have the evidence of the check. If we fill this part out first, the check, and then we give that check away and we forget to fill out our check stub, we might forget how much money we wrote that check to for, or who we wrote the check to. So we always want to get in the habit of filling out our check stub first. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to write the amount of the check. So here we have right up at the top, $165. Then we're going to write the date. So January 2nd. We're going to put who this check is written to. So here it's written to Eastside Supplies. And then we're going to also put what that check is written for. So it says supplies here, so it looks like we're buying supplies. After we fill out that top portion, now we're going to fill out the bottom portion. We're going to go down here to the bottom. We had already done this part where we had that deposit. Now it says amount of this check. Well, the amount is written right up here, so we're just going to copy that. So 165. And then this number here, how do we figure that out? We need to take the subtotal minus the amount of the check, because we're writing that check out. We're withdrawing that from the account. So now our balance in our checking account is $1,835. Okay, after we fill out our check stub, now we're going to start to write our check. And so I don't know if any of you have written checks before, but if you have not, it's a good skill to know, even though we don't use checks as much anymore. First of all, you're going to start with your date. So your date is going to be written up here, January 2nd. A lot of times they'll have that beginning of the year for you. So then you just need to put 16 here for 2016. Okay, next thing you're going to do is you're going to write who the check is written to. So here is that Eastside Supplies. Same thing over here. We can really just take this information from over here to put it onto our check. Then we're going to put the dollar amount in numbers. So here we have 165. We could also write this. Some of you might write it as 00 over 100. Either way works for the cents. Then we need to write the amount out in words. So here it's written as 165 and no cents is what they're saying here. So here's that 00 over 100 if they want. Now, why do they have a line drawn through here? Hopefully, you know that the reason that that line is there is so that no one can change this number here. If we were to go to the bank and we have this number written in figures and it was different from this line here, majority of the time the bank is not going to cash that check. However, if the bank were to cash that check, they are going to go by this number here. The reason for that is because the words written out, the number in words, is harder to change than it would be to change this number. I could easily just put another 1 in front of that, and now I have $1,165. So this is just a way to double check to make sure that those two numbers are correct. Next thing that we're going to do is write our for, our purpose. So here again, we're buying supplies, so I'm going to put that here. And then the last thing that I need to do is I need to sign my check. If I do not sign my check, Eastside Supplies would not be able to cash that check. Now, this transaction here is recording a voided check. A voided check just means that if I go back here, let's say that we screwed up on this check and we don't want to use it, I would write in big letters, I would write void across it. And the reason for that is I don't want someone to get a hold of it and be able to cash it. If I have void written across it, a bank knows that it can't be cashed. Now, the reason that we're going to record a voided check is because we keep our checks in order. So notice this check is check number 24. If we didn't record that, it would look like we were missing that check. So we need to just put it into our journal. So we're simply going to write the date, the account title. We don't have an account title, so we're simply going to write void. And then we're going to put the check number that we voided, C24. The post reference is going to be a check mark because there's nothing there for us to post. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a line through our credit column. Just saying, it's not that we forgot to put any information in here, it's just we don't have anything to put in there. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple minutes. You can look through the audit your understanding questions. It's important, guys, that you're actually looking at these and finding the answers. Okay, now go ahead and move on to the 5-1 work together. There will be a video for that work together as well.